Hi everyone, this week's Parsha is Parshas Naso. We have two really interesting topics back to back in this Parsha. The first one is that of Sota, which is a married woman who is suspected of acting inappropriately with a man who is not her husband. And directly following that is the topic of the Nazir, which is a man who has taken upon himself a vow of abstinence from a number of things, coming into contact with dead bodies, taking a haircut, and most importantly, drinking wine or being around any grape products. So why are these seemingly totally disconnected topics right next to each other? One explanation is that after the ordeal of the Sota, which involves a lot of drama, a lot of heartache, a lot of embarrassment, due to a woman acting inappropriately, it's thought because of drinking too much alcohol and being inappropriate around a man who's not her husband, the Nazir will see this and become so affected by the whole ordeal that he wants to abstain from alcohol altogether and just stay away from it completely. So the alcohol piece is really the connecting factor, seemingly, with these two topics. So alcohol has an interesting relationship with Judaism in general. Obviously, there are many times where we're not only encouraged to drink alcohol, specifically wine, but sometimes it's even mandatory. We make Kiddush on Shabbos over wine. We have a cup at a Sheva Brachos with wine and a bris, the 4 cups of wine in the Pesach Seder. It's even said that men are obligated to drink wine every day of Chol HaMoed in order to enjoy the holiday to the fullest. So we have, on the one hand, encouragement and, again, sometimes obligations to drink wine. But on the other hand, maybe because of this, there are also a myriad warnings in the Torah, throughout the Torah, about what can happen if you drink to excess. So Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei says, "Who has wounds without cause? Who has bloodshot eyes? Those who sit late over wine, those who come to search for mixed wine. Ultimately, it will bite like a serpent and sting like a viper. Your eyes will see strange women, and your heart will speak confusedly." In Chazal, it tells us, excess with wine leads to transgressing family purity laws, similar to Sota, for men and women, by the way, will lead you to judge incorrectly and will lead to poverty. There's a number of events that turned out very badly due to wine and alcohol. The first one is Adam and Chava. Some commentaries interpret the fruit from the Eitz Hadas as being grapes and wine and alcohol related, and that's what caused them to sin. Noach, after the flood, when he came to dry land, the first thing he planted was a vineyard, collected the grapes, made wine, got drunk, and acted inappropriately with his sons. And also Nadav and Avihu, who were the oldest sons of Aaron HaKohen, they got drunk after drinking wine, had poor judgment, entered the Holy of Holies, and were sentenced to death because of that. So there's even laws surrounding somebody who has had a revius, which is about 3 ounces of wine, and if they're still feeling the effects from that small amount of wine, they cannot daven, they cannot rule on halachic matters, they cannot make judgments on halachic matters, and if they're a Kohen, they cannot perform Birkas Kohanim. So this seems to say that there has to be some sort of balance, right? On the one hand, the Torah at times obligates us to drink wine for specific scenarios. And on the other hand, there's all these stories of things that have gone horribly wrong from drinking to excess. So I'd like to offer another explanation about why Nazir and Sota appear together. Not that witnessing the Sota creates a Nazir, but that they're both opposite extremes of a continuum in a negative way. So one, the Sota, we learn, because of alcohol, overconsumption of alcohol, has lax boundaries, is overindulgent, is not on guard, and obviously commits a serious sin. The other one, however, the Nazir, he completely removes himself from wine altogether, which at first glance seems okay, right? The best way to beat a challenge is to just not show up to the war at all. But there's a question about that, which is, when a Nazir ends his period of Nazirus, he brings a karban chatas, among others. A karban chatas is traditionally brought when somebody has sinned and they're bringing a karban to rectify it. So why would he bring a karban chatas after ending a period of something that seems so positive? He's totally abstaining from alcohol, which can cause serious transgressions. So in Pirkei Avos, it says, "All that the Holy One, blessed is He, created in this world, He created solely for His glory." Hashem even tells Adam and Chava, when they're in Gan Eden, "You shall surely eat." He's encouraging them and telling them, and even commanding them, you need to eat from this garden. Everything that I've created, like it says in Pirkei Avos, everything that's in this world, Hashem created for us to enjoy, which also means that everything that exists in this world is possible to be enjoyed and used to serve Hashem. There is some way to channel it correctly. So sometimes abstaining from something completely is sort of like taking a sledgehammer to the problem. It can be just as impulsive a decision and a solution as overusing, and both are not correct. Both are not what the Torah wants from us. So the Torah wants and preaches and asks us to find moderation, right? We want this balance. On the one hand, there's an obligation to not only drink wine, but enjoy everything that Hashem's world has to offer. And on the other hand, there's strong warnings and many examples of how overindulgence can take us away from the path of Hashem and away from what he wants from us. And I would also argue that either of these two extremes sort of allow us to not think about it anymore, right? Someone who's overindulging and acting inappropriately, doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, letting their guards down and having poor boundaries, clearly they're not being mindful and decisive and, purposeful with what they're doing. They're like letting their guard totally down. And somebody who's abstaining also doesn't have much of a decision process. You might have to make that initial decision, I'm never going to do this again. But after that, you're like in the clear. You don't have to interact with that challenge anymore because you're just taking yourself out of it totally. So not only does the Torah want moderation, but I think the goal of finding that middle ground is that it's a moving target. You have to constantly be reevaluating not only what you're doing, but what you stand for, how you're serving Hashem, how you're connecting to things, when you might be crossing that line into one or the other, into like unhealthy territory. And I think finding the moderation that Torah is asking from us asks us to be mindful and intentional and have critical thinking and be constantly connecting to God and deciding what it is that we have to be doing. And may we all find the moderation and the balance that lets us connect and grow. Good Shabbos.